You're looking for an espresso setup that actually works in the real world, not just a glossy brochure full of numbers. You want something that you can trust to give you a decent shot every morning, that won't take up half the kitchen counter, and that feels like a solid investment instead of a gamble. And you definitely don't want to end up with a gadget that looks cool but ends up collecting dust because it's too finicky or just plain unreliable. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started digging into manual espresso machines, the first thing that kept popping up in forums and comment sections was the sheer variety of hand crank options and the confusion over which ones actually deliver a consistent pressure. People were split between those who love the ritual of pulling a lever and those who were scared off by the learning curve. That's where the generic manual espresso machine tries to carve its niche. It promises a 58mm professional brewing head and an adjustable pressure system, all without needing a plug. In theory, that sounds perfect for a small apartment, a cabin, or even an office break room where you can't or don't want to run an electric unit. I spent a couple of weekends testing it in 3 different settings: my kitchen, a coworker's desk with a tiny countertop, and a weekend camping trip where I was limited to a portable stove. What mattered most wasn't the spec sheet, but how the machine behaved when the water was hot, the coffee was tamped, and the lever was pulled. The first thing I noticed was the feel of the lever. It's a smooth, weighted pull that gives you a clear sense of resistance, which is exactly what you need to dial in the pressure. The machine lets you set the pressure anywhere from a gentle 6 bar up to a more aggressive 9 bar, and the adjustment knob is intuitive. You just turn it before you start pulling. In my kitchen, I was able to get a decent espresso in about a minute and a half, which is comparable to a cheap electric model but without the noise. The shot had a thin layer of crema and a flavor profile that wasn't flat. It was brighter than a drip coffee but still had the body you expect from an espresso. The real win here is the consistency after a few practice pulls. The first 2 attempts each day were a little off, but after you get the water temperature right and the grind size settled, the machine repeats the same pressure curve, so the shots become predictable. When I moved it to a cramped office desk, the lack of electricity was a huge advantage. I simply heated water on the office kettle, poured it into the machine's boiler chamber, and let it sit for a minute while the metal warmed up. The whole process took under 5 minutes from start to finish, which is acceptable for a mid-morning pick-me-up. The biggest drawback in this scenario was the need for a stable surface. Because the unit is all metal and fairly heavy, a wobbling desk can cause the lever to feel uneven, and that translates into an inconsistent shot. If your office space has a wobbly table, you'll either need a small mat or a sturdier surface, otherwise the experience suffers. The camping test was the most telling. I packed the machine in a small duffel, along with a portable gas stove and a grinder. After boiling water on the stove, I transferred it into the espresso unit, waited for the boiler to reach the right temperature, and then cranked the lever. The shot was surprisingly good for an outdoor setting. The crema held up, and the flavor wasn't compromised by the altitude. The only real pain point was the need to manually monitor the water temperature. There's no built-in thermometer, so you either have to use a separate thermometer or develop a feel for it. If you're not comfortable with that extra step, you might end up pulling a shot that's either under-extracted, sour, or over-extracted, bitter. Who should buy this? If you're someone who enjoys the hands-on process of making coffee, values portability, and don't mind spending a few minutes getting the temperature right, this machine is a solid pick. It shines for people who live in small apartments, travel frequently, or want a backup espresso solution when electricity isn't reliable. It also appeals to those who want a more craft experience. The ability to tweak pressure on the fly lets you experiment with different beans and grind sizes without buying a whole new machine. Who should skip it? If you're looking for a push-button, one-touch solution that spits out a shot in 30 seconds, this isn't it. The learning curve, while not steep, does require patience and a bit of trial and error. Also, if your countertop is already cluttered or you don't have a stable surface to place a 2-kilogram metal unit on, the practical daily friction may outweigh the novelty. Finally, anyone who expects a built-in temperature gauge or automatic pressure regulation will be disappointed. The machine relies on manual adjustments.